my name is Allison Potter and I'm here to demonstrate the cross-connection and backflow educational model. I'm going to go ahead and do a run-through of all 4 scenarios in the model for proper utilization of the model. First, we have 2 back pressure scenarios. One is a private water well, which is located here, which is a private pump connected to the main system. Here in the office building, we have a pressurized vessel, and in this case, it's a boiler, which is connected to the water system. And then we also have 2 back siphon scenarios. The first one here is subsurface contamination, so the clean sanitary drinking water line and a sewer line connected underground through leaks. And then we also have a submerged inlet. Here it's an inlet that's going into a cow trough. So I'm going to go ahead and run the model and demonstrate each of the scenarios. The first thing you're going to want to do is we have a water tower here. The water tower is attached to a pump and with an overflow mechanism. So the first thing in starting the model is you're going to want to turn on the water tower pump. After about a minute, your water tower should be full. The water level will rise all the way into the overflow tube, and then will start draining back into your inlet reservoir. To make sure this happens properly, you'll want to squeeze the biggest tube coming from the water tower, which is the overflow tube, a couple times just to make sure the water is flowing correctly through it. You might even want to pick up the tube from the water in the inlet reservoir just to make sure that it's flowing correctly. So once your water tower is cycling correctly, you're going to go ahead and want to open ball valve 1. It should be close up to this point to prevent water from flowing into the model, but once the water tower is ready to go, you can open ball valve 1. This will allow water to access the system. So all of the ball valves should be closed except for the 2 ball valves on the back side of the model. We have ball valve 8 and ball valve 7, and both of those should be open. Ball valve 8 is connected to the system, and ball valve 7 is connected to the house. The house will begin filling, and throughout the entire operation of the model, the house outlet should be open. This is a way to represent water accessing public. So the house is also equipped with an overflow mechanism, and so likewise, you're going to want to go ahead and squeeze the tube coming from the house a couple times just to make sure that it's draining correctly. Once water has entered the system and the house is filling and draining correctly, you can operate any of the scenarios on the model. I'm going to start with the back pressure scenarios. The first one we have here is a private water well. This is when a private water well with pump is connected to the main system through a cross connection. To operate this scenario, you're going to want to plug in the pump that is located inside the reservoir. You can do this when you plug in the water tower pump or right before operating the scenario. To activate this scenario, I'm simply going to turn ball valve 4, which connects the pump to the system. And you can see that red dye comes from this reservoir and enters the system here and eventually the house here. Once contaminated water has entered the house, you can go ahead and close ball valve 4 and let the water drain out of the house. The second back pressure scenario is a pressurized vessel located inside the office building. You can do any pressurized system, but here we have a boiler. So the way to pressurize the system is to pump this handle. It'll probably need to be pumped 3 to 5 times to pressurize it enough to overpower the system. You can do this before operating the model, or you can do it while you run the scenario to show that it's pressurized. The only ball valve you need to turn for this scenario is ball valve 6, which is where it connects to the system. And when you turn ball valve 6, you'll notice the green dye located inside the reservoir enter the system and eventually the house. After dye has entered the house, you can go ahead and turn ball valve 6 back off and let the water drain from the system. The next scenario is a back siphon scenario. Back siphon takes place when there's a pressure drop in the system. To do this for the back siphon for the submerged inlet, we're going to use the fire flow scenario. So you can go ahead and turn on ball valve 5, and when you do this, water will flow into this reservoir. You don't want to wait too long because if too much water flows, it may overflow this reservoir. To get back siphon to take place, you can open ball valve 2, which will activate the fire flow scenario. When this takes place, I would go ahead and give it a couple squeezes just to make sure that it's flowing correctly. And then water should siphon from this scenario with the dye back into the main system. After water has come into the main system that has dye in it, you can go ahead and close ball valve 2, and then I would close ball valve 5 pretty soon after that as well, so that you don't overflow your reservoir. You'll see dyed water in the system and eventually the house. Another back siphon scenario you can use is a submerged inlet on a truck fill station. So we have an inlet that's here submerged in the dyed water within a truck. To get the back siphon to take place, open valve 5, which will allow water to enter the truck. Now, to get back siphon to take place, you're going to go ahead and open the fire flow scenario. Water will exit the truck and enter the main system. Then, you'll close ball valve 2, and then eventually close ball valve 5 so as not to overflow the truck. The green contaminated dye should then enter the house. The final scenario I'll demonstrate is the subsurface contamination. This is also back siphon, so we need a pressure drop in the main system. We achieve this through using a main break. The main break is located here where a section of flexible tubing is connected to the system with quick disconnects. So first you'll see here in the model that there are two lines. The top one is the sanitary line, which is the drinking water line, and the bottom is the sewage line, which houses the contamination. Both lines in this case have cracks in them. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one, which will allow dye to enter the system through the bottom line, which is the sewage line. Because there's a crack, you'll see the dye contaminate the entire box. I'll go ahead and open ball valve 3, which allows water to flow into the surrounding area through the sanitary drinking line. So water will enter the system, and then there's an overflow mechanism placed on the bottom there. So with positive pressure, you get water coming out and not entering the system. But when the main break takes place, I'm going to disconnect this flexible tubing, and there will be a pressure drop in the system. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and close ball valve 8, and I'll also close ball valve 1 so that maintenance can be done on this section of tubing. When this takes place, you'll see that water siphons from this top line, which was our drinking water line, into the system here, causing contamination. I'm going to open ball valve 1, after fixing the main, and open ball valve 8, and you'll see that the contamination there will either enter the house or will circulate through the system. So that contamination, even if it doesn't make it into the house, has made it into the drinking water system. A few things to keep in mind to ensure successful operation of your system is first, turn off valve 1 when you're not demonstrating a scenario on the model. This helps save water and recirculates from the water tower to the inlet reservoir. Secondly, you're going to want to make sure any tube is free of kinks. This would prevent water flow and could potentially overflow any one of your scenarios. You also want to make sure to turn off valve 5 when you're not using that scenario so that that scenario does not overflow. The last thing is you're going to want to make sure any tube free falls off the table into the exit or inlet reservoir so that nothing overflows and so that the water can drain effectively. That concludes the presentation of the cross-connection and backflow educational model. For more detailed information on any of these scenarios, utilize the operations manual which accompanies the model. The best way to familiarize yourself with the model is to practice it yourself. Good luck!